On October 28, 1892, the SS Bama arrived in the bustling ports of Nigeria. The decks were alive with movement. Passengers gathered their belongings, the crew shouting orders, and the humid air thick with the scent of the sea and the tropics beyond. Among the travelers was Edith Warner. Weary from the long and often uncomfortable voyage, yet filled with determination. As she stepped onto the shore, she knew her life's work was only beginning. Over the next 33 years, she would devote herself to missionary service and leave a quiet yet lasting impact on the people of Nigeria. Welcome back to the Church History Podcast. My name is Laura Lee and I am your host. If you're new to this podcast, we cover the story of the church in chronological order. In our first episode, all the way back in 2016, we covered the life of Christ, and we've been covering the story of the church in order since then, and now we're in the 1800s. Before we start, I want to remind you to pick up my new book, The Church is Corrupted. I'm currently writing my next book, The Church is Reformed. But have you ever wondered how the church moved from the church that was spreading truth and grace around the world to the church that was in desperate need for a reformation? This book covers that story. Here is an ad. My new book, The Church is Corrupt, is available for order. I previously published the book, The Church is Born, which was part 1 in our series, and that delved into the creation of the church. But my second book picks up where the first one left off. It offers a unique and insightful perspective on the church's journey. Discover the rich history of the church, its triumphs, its failures, and its heroes. In this second book in the series on church history, we journey through the pivotal moments that shaped Christianity as we know it. From the foundational theology of the early church to the inspiring lives of great men and women who boldly stood for their faith. Explore the church's role during the Crusades, the Inquisitions, and even the discovery of America. Learn how over centuries the church began to slowly lose its way, setting the stage for the monumental changes just before the Protestant Reformation. With each chapter highlighting a different story, you're going to be inspired by the heroes of our faith and challenged to reflect on the lessons from the church's successes and its stumbles. Whether you're a seasoned historian or just beginning your exploration of church history, this book offers valuable insights for everyone. Both books, The Church is Born and The Church is Compromised, are available on Amazon for you to order. So if you haven't gotten the first book, why not get both today and delve into the comprehensive understanding of the church's journey? All right, let's jump into today's episode. First, I just want to let you know I'm going to be having to say a few words and names that are from Nigeria. And right off the bat, I'm going to tell you I'm going to do my best to pronounce them. But if I'm not pronouncing them correctly, I'm sure I'll hear about it in the comment section. But just know I did the best I could. Our story starts in London, England. Edith Warner was born in London, England in the year 1867. We don't know a lot about her early childhood, but at the age of 14, she visited a missionary meeting that was being held near her home. The call to missions penetrated her heart, and at the young age of 14, she stepped forward and gave her life to Christ. She told God she would go anywhere He asked her to go. Her life was no longer her own. Her life belonged to Christ. Now, Edith was only 14 years old, so she couldn't just head off to the mission field. For the next 11 years, she prepared for the mission field. She was attending school and she joined a missionary band. Today, in schools, we call them clubs. In the process of joining this band or this club, she had to make a pledge that she would enter the mission field as soon as she was old enough to go. And this is a reminder for all my younger listeners. God doesn't just call adults to the mission field. He calls young people. And once you've answered this call, it's time to begin preparing. It would be amazing if we had missionary bands or clubs starting up today. Well, Edith met that pledge in the year 1892 when she was commissioned and set out to sea. Her trip across the ocean was 48 days long. For 48 grueling days, Edith endured the unforgiving reality of life aboard a trading steamer, sailing along the West African coast. It was nothing like the gentle world that she had known. The food was barely edible, the heat was stifling, and the air was thick with coarse language and the stink of trade, the smell of gunpowder, rum, and sweat of men who were seeking profit in Africa's booming markets. The ship rolled violently with the waves, and there was many delays that were extremely frustrating. But Edith, although very weary, never wavered. Then at last, on the 28th of October, 1892, land appeared on the horizon. The relief of reaching land was short-lived. The Lagos harbor, clogged with silt and far from the bustling port it would become later years, offered no welcome. There were no docks, no piers, only treacherous surf and a series of very dangerous transfers. One by one, the missionaries were lowered from the ship by hoist, their bodies swaying over the sea before they were dropped into a surf boat below. Now this small vessel bucked and lurched as its strong-armed paddlers navigated the waves towards a local steamer that was waiting offshore. But the journey wasn't over yet. Once alongside the steamer, they faced another ordeal, being hoisted once again, this time up into the deck of the waiting ship. Ropes strained, pulleys groaned, and the missionaries with pounding hearts and clenched hands were hauled into the deck like they were cargo. It was undignified, it was disoriented, and it was stomach-turning. And it was Edith's welcome to West Africa. Yet as Edith's feet finally touched solid ground, she took a deep breath and steadied herself. This was no longer just a journey. This was the beginning of her calling. Already in the area at this time was Mary Slessor. Now, we've covered Mary Slessor's story, and I'm going to include a link to that in the show notes. If you haven't heard her story, I would suggest going back and listening to it. This episode will give you perspective on Edith's work. Christmas Day, 1892, found Edith Warner not in the warmth of a family gathering or in a candlelight quiet of a church service. Nope, she was on a boat just off the coast of Lagos. The distant hum of the city drifting over the water, mixing with the creak of the ship and the occasional cry of the seabird. She had made it this far, yet her journey was far from over. The crossing of the Lagos had been scary. The treacherous sandbars nearly capsized the boats as they struggled through the surfs. Edith clenched the sides of her vessel, praying with every heave of the waves. Now, she was preparing for the next leg of her journey. To Onitsha. She prepped herself for the unknown that lay ahead. The journey inland was no less daunting. A river steamer carried Edith and her friends along the Niger, winding past dense villages and the jungle that dotted the banks. At every stop, crowds gathered, looking to see this pale-skinned woman aboard this boat. For many, there was a curiosity and there were whispers of their presence. Yet, there were others that were wary. But Edith's gentle nature endeared her to anybody that she met. The people were struck by her kind demeanor and her youthful appearance. They gave her the name Ominwa, which means pet child, believing her to be the daughter of Mrs. Hill, one of the people that she was traveling with. And it was that title, although it was playful, it signified something really deep. They were accepting her. Finally, on January 7th, 1893, January stepped onto the soil of Onitsha, her true mission field at last. Before her stood small clay houses. One of them would be her home, a humble structure with 3 cramped rooms, its walls steeped in rumors of spirits that lingered in the night. But fear had no place in Edith's heart. She came with purpose, and there was work to be done. Her calling was a school, and she wanted to teach girls. She started with music. Music became her bridge. It was her portable organ that she took with her, and she would play it and it filled the air with hymns, and that would draw students in, and it also softened the walls they had built. With her sharp ear and her patient spirit, she began to learn the Igbo language. She mastered its cadence and its nuance with remarkable ease. And unlike the others who really struggled with this language, Edith listened, learned, and let the words really take root with her. But there was a much deeper challenge. Among the Igbo, the birth of twins was seen as an omen of evil. Mothers who had twins were shunned, and the infants, innocent and helpless, were simply thrown away. The horror of this practice struck Edith to her core, and she just could not stand idly by. Along with her fellow missionaries, she sought to protect these mothers and to rescue these children, and to show what she called a more excellent way, one built not on fear, but on the love of Jesus Christ. Now, if you have heard the story of Mary Slessor, you will know this practice of killing twins was a very big part of her story, and Mary worked hard to make this practice illegal, and she legally adopted 9 children, but rescued and raised more than 70. But back to the story of Edith. Working on the mission was not without suffering, and often fever would sweep through the communities, taking lives with basically no warning. Then Edith felt her darkest days. She had traveled here with Bishop Hill and his wife. They were her mentors, and they had become like her parents. In fact, her nickname came because many people believed that Mrs. Hill actually was her mom. She wasn't alone because she had this older couple with her. But when the fever swept through the village, both Bishop Hill and his wife became sick. Edith prayed for their recovery. She did everything she could to help them, but in just a matter of days, her only connection to her home was gone. Bishop Hill and his wife, who had guided Edith's early steps, died from this relentless illness. And their loss was this horrible reminder of the cost of this mission work. But even in her grief, Edith refused to quit. Edith believed that education was an important part of helping the people of Africa, and she especially wanted to help young girls receive an education. People didn't believe her schools would work. The villages were often fighting with each other. There were bitter rivals that dated back multiple generations. But Edith knew the power of God and the love of Jesus Christ could defeat these cultural rivals. In 1895, under the blessing of a man named Bishop Tugwell, the girls' boarding school officially opened. It was very modest at the beginning, a 3-room bungalow, a dormitory, and a single classroom. 9 girls enrolled at first. They arrived wide-eyed and uncertain and unfamiliar with the concept of routine, discipline, or even a notion of what education was. But in the first few years, that number had grown to 24, and each girl was a testament to Edith's perseverance. Edith watched as the miracle of God's peace proceeded. Edith watched as the miracle of God's peace that surpasses all understanding. That peace came to her school. She watched as girls from rival villages sat together in her classrooms. She watched as friendships were formed where hostility had once ruled. She saw women who had been discarded by their own people find dignity and hope. And as the years unfolded, she witnessed hearts that were transformed, not through dramatic miracles or fiery sermons, but through quiet, persistent work of love. And the work was grueling. Edith often referred to her students as raw specimens. They required extraordinary patience in order to mold them. The day would begin with 4 hours of academic lessons, reading, writing, the foundation of knowledge that had once been deemed unattainable for them. Afternoons were dedicated to practical skills, 2 hours of learning domestic work like cooking, cleaning, laundry, tasks that would actually empower these young women with independence and dignity. Cooking in particular was an ordeal. The girls pounded boiled yams into dough-like meals, lifted heavy wooden pestles over their head, It was back-breaking work, but Edith was ever calm, patient, and steady, and guided them not just as a teacher, but as a mother figure. The school became more than just a place of learning. It became a beacon of transformation. On Sunday, the girls who had once run carefree in the village streets now marched in neat rows to the church. They became the church choir, and their voices lifted in worship, led by Edith, who was very skilled on the organ. Her love for music, which was once just a simple joy that she had in her childhood, was now a tool for revival, and hymns that were sung in the native language resonated throughout the town. Edith wasn't a powerful preacher like Spurgeon or Billy Sunday, nor was she the powerhouse leader of Mary Slessor. Edith used the gifts, talents, and the personality that God gave her, and in her quiet, sweet, persistent love, she changed Africa one woman at a time. But her mission stretched beyond the classroom. In 1899, she took on a great burden to care for children who had been abandoned as infants under the superstition of twins. Twins, as we said earlier, were seen as a curse and left to die, and their mothers shunned. Edith refused to just stand by. She pleaded for their lives, and she established what was called a crush to care for these forsaken children. She fought against this deeply rooted fear that had existed for many generations. But many of these babies still died despite her effort. Edith refused to turn away. One day, Edith found a tiny baby that had been left to die and had passed away. She picked up the body of this newborn baby. She would give this tiny human the dignity it had deserved. There was no one around who was willing to help Edith, so she went to the pile of wood near her house and she built a tiny coffin with her own hands. She then placed the tiny human in the coffin. And then, all on her own, she dug a small grave and laid the child to rest herself. It was an act of defiance against this darkness that gripped the land. It was a silent but a profound declaration that these lives mattered. Every child saved, every mother embraced was a step toward a more excellent way. Local men scoffed at the idea of educating girls. They dismissed it as a waste of time. But Edith, instead of fighting back with them, let the results speak for themselves. The young women emerged from her school very different. Their eyes held knowledge. Their posture carried confidence. Their voices spoke with clarity and faith. They stood apart from their peers not only in their skills, but in how they presented themselves. Visiting dignitaries from other countries took notice. They remarked on the radiance of their face, a glow that was not seen anywhere else. Edith never sought recognition for what she had built. Yet, in the year 1899, she had become one of the most significant forces of change in Oninja. Edith had only been in Africa for 7 years, and she had already done so much in the name of Jesus Christ. In just 7 years, through trial, loss, relentless perseverance, she had not only opened the doors for education, but she begun shifting the very culture all around her. It would be impossible to know how far-reaching her work would eventually be, and how the seeds sown in a 3-room bungalow had bloomed into a movement that was empowering generations of women. She pressed on, one lesson, one hymn, one child at a time. As the world stepped into the 20th century, celebrations on New Year's Eve 1899 took on a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. In Edith's homeland of England, crowds gathered in London singing Old Lang Syne as church bells rang in the new century, the year 1900. Queen Victoria, in the final months of her reign, reflected on the era soon to pass. Fireworks lit up the sky across the United States, from New York to San Francisco, as people cheered the dawn of a new age. Meanwhile, in Africa, the mood varied. There were some European-controlled cities like Lagos and Cape Town, where some of the colony elites did host grand banquets, and there were church services. But for most of the African communities, they just carried on with traditional celebrations, unaware of this significant calendar change. By the year 1900, the one small schoolhouse that Edith Warner had founded was no longer just an experiment. It had become a cornerstone of the mission work in Nigeria. Year after year, Edith had poured herself into this work, shaping young minds, breaking cultural barriers, and carrying out a space where girls, who had once been dismissed, were allowed to thrive. But now, the school had grown beyond its modest beginnings, and it was time for a bold step forward. Edith's mission was not just about textbook and skills. It was about saving lives, especially the flight of the taboo children, twins who had been cast out by deep-seated superstition. For years, she had fought against the fear that condemned these children. And then, in the year 1901, the breakthrough came. The British government, which was ruling over this area at the time, officially outlawed the killing of twins. This practice still didn't vanish overnight, but the law provided a shield for the vulnerable, and the school became a refuge for those who had been rescued from the grip of these old beliefs. In December, in the year 1903, Edith and her students gathered all of their belongings. They were heading on a journey to their new home on a quiet hilltop 5 miles east of Onitsha. The move wasn't just practical, it was strategic. They had outgrown their small school, and now they were going to move to a new, larger one. But they would be removed from the distractions of the bustling town. The school could flourish in a peaceful environment, allowing for deeper learning and stronger mentorship. For the first time, the staff now lived alongside the students. They shared in their daily routines and guided them not only in the academics, but in life itself. Then Edith made a daring decision. She decided to introduce school fees for families who could afford them. At first, this idea sparked resistance. Why should girls' education cost anything at all? But Edith understood something the skeptics did not. Value demands investment. And as reluctant families slowly adjusted, something remarkable happened. The reputation of the school soared. Families that had once scoffed at formal education for their daughters now took pride in their attendance. The fees, although they were very modest, instilled a sense of responsibility and respect, both within the community and among the students themselves. The school thrived. Girls not only excelled in scripture, but academics. They were also earning income through practical skills. They became expert bakers, their bread so delicious that even local officials declared it unmatched from any other bakery. They took in laundry work, demonstrating the dignity of honest labor. They were more than just students. They were pioneers of self-sufficiency. They proved that education wasn't just about learning, it was about empowerment. One story in particular stood out as a testament to the school's quiet revolution. A man, once shunned for abandoning idol worship, brought his child, one of those once condemned infants, to school every single day. He watched as his child thrived under the care of Edith and her teachers, and his heart softened. In time, he came to faith. He was baptized, his child was baptized, and it was a symbol of family, people, and a culture that was beginning to change. The school's impact stretched beyond its walls. As the girls returned to their villages during holidays, they carried with them stories of peace, of learning, of a world that went beyond just rivalries and fear. They shared meals with their neighbors who had once been their enemies. They recounted lessons that had once seemed unimaginable for women. And slowly, the divisions that had scarred communities for generations were softening. But then, amongst all these triumphs, came deep sorrow. In the year 1907, Edith's closest friend, Miss H. Duncombe, fell ill, and she was forced to return to England. Edith was sad with her friend away and worried about her as she was in England. And then word arrived. Miss Duncan had passed away. The loss was devastating. Together they had built something extraordinary, and now Edith had to stand alone and carry it forward. This was the second time somebody of great importance in her work, had passed away. But the work did not die with her grief. The foundation they had laid together held firm, and the school pressed on. The move to the countryside was so much more than just relocation. It marked a deep root of a mission that would outlive Edith. Over the next 25 years, her girls' school stood as a beacon of faith and knowledge and transformation. It proved that education wasn't just about reading and writing. It was about redeeming a future that had once been denied to these girls. This school had become a beacon of hope for abandoned children. Children who were dedicated as living sacrifices to idols were rescued and brought to the school. Some were eventually reunited with their families. Others were not able to be reunited and found a new home with Edith. The gospel's transformative power was evident in these children who had been ostracized but now embraced faith and helped reshape their communities as they became adults. Edith's enduring influence extended so far beyond the classroom. Her dedication to education, faith, and social transformation and laid a foundation for a bright future. Although the change was slow, her work at the girls' school became a cornerstone in the empowerment of women in Nigeria, a legacy that continues to inspire generations today. The school eventually was given the name St. Monica. Then, one of the most transformative additions was when they established the first Girl Guides troop in the region. This program cultivated a spirit of leadership, friendship, and self-confidence. In 1923, the Phelps-Stokes Commission lauded the school as one of the most efficient institutions in all of Africa. This recognition opened the doors for St. Monica's to become a government-assisted school. This secured it for the future. Still, Edith's vision ensured that the spiritual mission of the school remained paramount. She believed deeply that education without the transformative power of the gospel would fall short of true change. Her focus on spiritual growth bore fruit in countless girls who emerged not only as educated women, but as bright, faithful Christians. Today, Edith Warner's graduates spread across Nigeria. They shape the nation. They are teachers, nurses, evangelists, and homemakers. They have carried with them the values instilled at their time of school. They became beacons of light in their own community. Even as the growing responsibility of St. Monica's School demanded more of her time, Edith never lost her adventurous spirit or her fever for spreading the gospel. She took school holidays as an opportunity not for rest and change of scenery, but for rekindling her evangelistic zeal. So she had vacation adventures, but they were not leisure retreats. They were powerful journeys. They combined exploration with a passion for sharing the message of Christ. Edith meticulously planned her holiday travels. In fact, she called them the regions beyond, places that needed to hear the gospel. Her trips, yes, she wanted to discover the beauty and diversity of Nigeria, but even more, she wanted to forge new paths for evangelism. And despite the rapid modernization that came during this era, bringing in roads, railways, and even motor cars, much of the country remained untouched as it had been for centuries. Edith embraced both of these worlds. She rivaled in the contrast and using every opportunity to connect with the people she encountered. And throughout her journeys, Edith's gentle and nurturing manner of sharing the gospel left a lasting impression. She held meetings in every village that they went through. She engaged curious crowds with her traveling organ, her simple songs, and clear explanation of the Christian faith. Her unwavering trust in God and ability to inspire others created connections that endured long after her visits. Even in the later years of her life, as her travels became less frequent, Edith's commitment to exploration and evangelism never wavered. Her ventures not only refreshed her spirit, but they also expanded the reach of the gospel in Nigeria. Through her journeys, Edith showed how purposeful rest and a steadfast mission can actually coexist and leave a legacy of faith, courage, and compassion for anyone who followed. As we close the story of Edith Warner, we're reminded of her extraordinary life marked by humility, perseverance, and unwavering dedication to her mission. Edith's legacy is not one of big grandeur or fame. In fact, most people have never even heard of Edith Warner. Her legacy is one of quiet, steadfast faithfulness, and her work transformed lives, not only through education and skill building, but also through the life-changing power of the gospel. Her compassion left a profound mark on the communities she served. She set a standard of what it means to serve with love. Her life teaches us the power of quiet, faithful service. While her accomplishments were monumental, they were built on these small acts of care, small moments of courage and conviction. In a world that usually celebrates loud and immediate, her story reminds us that true, lasting change often comes through patience, humility, and persistence. Her example encourages us to look for our own unique way to make an impact, whether your impact is big or small, and trust that even the simplest act of love can create ripples of transformation. Edith Warner's story is just one of many that highlight the incredible contributions of missionaries. If you want to hear more stories of people like Edith, you could check out more stories here on our podcast. If this story has inspired you, a couple of things. First, consider supporting missions that continue this work, or find ways to serve in your own local community. Together, you can carry forward the spirit of love, service, and hope that Edith embodied. And if this episode inspired you, or it made you think of somebody who is serving God quietly and faithfully, encourage them today by sharing this with them. I'm going to be away next week as our family is taking a vacation. But in the meantime, you can get caught up on all our past episodes, or you can order my book, The Church is Born and the Church is Corrupted. I'm going to see you in 2 weeks when I come back, and I'm going to tell you the story of a slave who was freed after the Civil War, who then fought for the right to be educated, and then fought for the right to be on a mission board, and then left America to be a missionary. But through all the discrimination that she faced, she only showed love, grace, and mercy, and her life impacted the lives of so many. It's another missionary most people have never heard of, but one that is powerful, and you don't want to miss that story. So make sure you come back in 2 weeks. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. We release new content every Monday, and don't forget to check out our website at lauraleesiemens.com for more information and additional resources. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week as we continue our journey through the incredible history of the church.